So my spirit team has been gently screaming at me to tell my story, my truth, my testimonial. And I have had a lot of attempts at trying to do this. And once you hear my story and my testimonial in my journey of spiritual conscious awakening, you will understand why I have had issues trying to get this out. Trying to get over some fears and dark nights of the soul and karmic moments. I know why I'm supposed to do this because I do know that I have an inspiring story to tell. And it's inspiring in the fact that I had signed a soul contract to come into this lifetime experiencing what the opposite of unconditional love is. I was birthed into one of the most dysfunctionally toxic, karmic, emotionally immature families that, you can get. There's more for sure, but this one definitely was one that I was not even aware of until recently. As I had really kept my blinders on. And there's reasons. There were survival reasons, and that'll get explained here too. Again, I know that I am being told or that I am being guided to speak my truth and my story about my journey and my life so far because of all the obstacles that I have overcome all by myself. I am completely self-taught. I have attempted to try to go back and get schooling and this and that through the traditional ways over and above my current bachelor's degree. And the universe, I now understand, was like, no, you don't need that. You have your own innate skills and knowledge to do this. And your goal, the point of you doing this all by yourself without anybody to help you emotionally, to give you physical support, to give you financial support if and when was needed. None of that. And to still show you how somebody who has come from the very bottom of the vibrational scale can rise up and ascend to the higher vibrations where we as the ones who are trying to awaken are trying to move towards and expand into. So I know that one of the things is that I get a little nervous thinking I'm speaking to so many people potentially at some point. I know right now it's just me. And but that is something that is one of my fears I'm trying to overcome right now, is the public speaking part of this. I am more than happy to speak about my journey and all my obstacles. I don't carry any shame or guilt anymore, at least, regarding everything I've been through. I am going on 6.5 years sober, dealt with lots of addictions, grew up in a family filled and riddled, infested with addictions. And so the thing that I'd like to just start off by saying is that this is going to create possible triggers for some of you. And that is, as a light worker, as a chosen generational curse trauma breaker, I know that's kind of part of my job for those of you who are ready to allow the trigger to, help that be a catalyst for you in the same way that it, was for me when I had to go through it. But also, I am supposed to speak on this and get detailed because for me, it was helpful to know what I was releasing in order to release it. Not with everything, but in regards to who you are and where you came from, extremely important, at least in my journey. And I'm not saying this is for everybody. This message is definitely not going to be for everybody. I am trying to be as authentic as I can right now. And this is, again, going to be explained in my timeline why being my true authentic self has been a struggle to, find my flow into. So, and apologize right now for all like this happening. One of the things that I've been dealing with in my journey was mold exposure, which I will tap into a lot more in later videos. But I'm getting mold exposure from the state that I'm in, and so it's one of my histamine triggers, or the ways that I am able to see what is happening, is my right eye will water. So anyways, that's, if you see this, that's, I'm just letting pick or tapping away the wetness, the leaking from my eye. So I like I say, this is gonna be an inspiring story about how there was a person who came from not knowing what love was, not having any idea, growing up in the opposite of loving family, growing up in that low vibrational, parasitic, toxic environment, and then all by myself, having to find my own ways when I didn't have money even to still keep my, keep me moving forward and expanding into my awareness and my consciousness awareness. And I'm going to be able to show you how my higher self just let me slide right into flow state. When I finally said, enough is enough, I'm not letting life get in the way anymore. And so I will show you how I went from victimhood mentality to survivor thriver, and how I have left victimhood mentality behind. And it's tricky when you're coming from the spaces, these low vibrational spaces that I was coming from. I remember saying along my path that if I didn't have the faith and the knowing that there is love out there in the way that I have yet to experience it, and that there are people out there that are wanting to experience this with me, this love that I want to give to people, that I know it's out there, having that faith. So the only prerequisite that you need in order to continue watching this is to have a prerequisite of just wanting more for yourself. The will to know there is more and better for you, for us as a collective. So I, at all points, will always just be speaking very objectively and factually, so that you can see how I put the pieces of my puzzle together to maybe give you a breadcrumb, or just a little nugget of information that'll help plant a seed for you in the way that I was able to have seeds planted for me along my path. I was able to find really good guides and support online along the path. However, it's been a difficult task for me to find these people in face-to-face 3D. Face-to-face, when I say, in close, human body to human body, versus just online, which is no problem. But that was kind of part of my hiccup, is that I was trying to help others heal, that thing that we all do as empathic, highly sensitive people. We want to help others, right? I was trying to always help others that ultimately didn't want to heal. And these are the ones that, then project their issues, because, you don't try to help somebody heal that's not ready, because they will get angry and they could turn on you and they can project their issues on you. They can create false narratives about you. And I'm just going to give you some hinters, some hinters, some hints, some clues, and some, little tidbits of information. Like I say, some breadcrumbs that I wish I could have had a little sooner. That might have helped, just speed along my process a little bit quicker in certain areas. And with that being said, this is a marathon. This is not a race in any type of way. However, because I allowed myself to be so controlled by the people I grew up with for so long, This is what hindered me, blinded me, kept me blind for 40 years. Basically, I guess I was just walking aimlessly for about 40 years, doing the motions, but knowing that there was something more, and allowing life's obstacles, spirit realm, physical realm, to interfere and try to stop me from moving forward. And it worked for about 20 years. And like I say, my timeline is going to help you understand this more. So I think I got everything out that I'd like to say. I am love and I am light, and I am here to help shine my light onto any of you who are feeling like you're lost in this process, feeling like, oh my God, I am like, oh, there's so much going up against me. Like, I'm going to show you how I had so much coming up against me from the minute I was conceived up until my, awakening really began, and has continued beautifully for me. And if you are somebody who is resonating with this and is still listening to me at this point, all I got to say is congratulations, because you are on an amazing path. So I'm very excited for you, very proud for you, because this is a hard path. And our souls, upon coming into this lifetime, said, anything less traumatic than what we currently have experienced in this lifetime would be boring for our souls, right? So you got to think about it like that a little bit, right? Yeah, I am going to try to figure out, and hopefully as I go on and time goes on, my storytelling abilities and the ability to really add in the humor that I have found through this process, I'll try to bring that out. But one of the things that I think I'm going to try to do so that I can ensure that I try to sum up my timeline as efficiently as possible and as concisely as possible is I'm going to pretend like I am speaking to one of my many therapists that I've had throughout my last 7 years, which there were 10 therapists. And it wasn't because like anything bad. They all got better opportunities, and I don't mean to quote, but I say that because, again, looking back on it, I know it was the powers that were and like spirit realm, my cord attachments to the negative energies, the low vibrational energies from within my family that were still holding me back at times, and controlling my energies to make me think that, how it is as good as it can get, and it's just not true. So I'm going to pretend like I'm so anyways, all the therapists ended up leaving, or I ended up having to switch so many times because a lot of them got better job opportunities, right? And so at the time, you're just like, oh, okay. But that's how dedicated I was to heal, is as I said, I don't care. Bring it on. Let's find the next good one. Because I had really good relationships with my beginning therapists. And I give them so many props, because had I been able to continue with one solid therapist, I'm sure, it would have gotten me so much further ahead, because every time you have to switch a therapist, you have to tell your story all over again, and then, go through the testing, and it takes like 3 months before you're back into, really truly getting the therapeutic trauma help that you went there to begin with. Or went into it to begin with. So I'm going to pretend like I'm speaking to a therapist to try to get this out. So, okay, 15 minutes in. Sorry for that, such a long intro into this, but my story, like I say, is going to be different. And I just wanted at all times, my intentions are to enlighten, to shed light for people that are dealing with feeling like they've been blinded by their own family, feeling like they've been blinded by society, feeling like, just blind and too scared to see correctly, just too scared to see, not knowing how to see. Growing up when you grow, let's say you're a parasite, right? And you grow up in a parasitic environment. That's all you know, right? So when somebody's trying to speak about the fact that there's not a parasitic environment and you can just change to it, it's not as simple as going, oh, okay, I can just change to it. For me, I had to understand why it was parasitic to begin with. So, like I say, a lot of how I'm gonna speak about all this it is not about pointing fingers. I have complete empathy for my family members because of the fact that I respect the fact that they only did what they did because they're unhealed and they weren't bold enough and courageous enough to take on this mission like I am. So, with that said, okay, so if the therapist was to ask me, like, why are you here? Okay, well, I am here because the first 20 years of my life, from the moment I was conceived, I lived in utter fear every day, especially of when my dad was going to come home from work, because I didn't know if he was going to come home and scream at me, hit me, belittle me, because it wasn't it wasn't about if he was going to do it. It was about how long would it be until this explosion from him were to occur. Because the people that took the brunt of that were my mom and myself. And that was hard to watch as well when it happened to her. And that's why I say, like, there's a lot that, okay, anyways, sorry, I'm going to stop that. Anyways, so first 20 years of my life, I lived in pure fear. I said this to every single therapist. I want to know why I'm the only person that I know of that has feared their father up until 40 years old. When I would ask other people about this, people are, I don't fear my father. Like, what do you mean? And so that's just to give you an idea of the type of fear. This is that, like, I feared my father until the age of 40. I was that person as well that contoured my life to get approval and his approval with his everything in my life. So I contoured and I did in my life. I went to school for the things that he wanted me to do instead of what I wanted, and so many different things. Just examples, okay? So what I also dealt with during that time period was extreme verbal and mental abuse, all through that time period. Types of things like shut up, don't talk until you're spoken to. Nobody wants to hear that. I definitely was never allowed to ask questions. I'd get slapped, yelled at. And when my dad would yell at you, he'd get in your face and he'd scream at the top of his lungs. And that's frightening, especially when you're young. And so I ended up finding out that I thought my brother had dealt with this as well. And I found out later that he had not. And that I was the one that was singled out in this. And I am definitely the empathic, highly sensitive person, intuitive. So I know that when I was younger, I feel like what was happening is I had all these inquisitive questions as a child would. And one of the things that my dad had said to me when I was young was, like I remember coming home from school going, Dad, I'm so excited. I want to show you what I learned today. So this is a positive thing I'm bringing at him as his child. And he says to me, he slaps me across the face. He goes, don't talk smart to me. And he had said, basically, he felt bad because he had spoke about this at one point to me, but he felt bad about the fact that he didn't get past high school. And in his mind, he didn't feel as educated then. And so me coming and being excited about something I'm learning was intimidating to him, I guess. You know what I mean? So the style of person that type of reaction would come out of would be like a narcissistic characteristic. So this just kind of planting some seeds to prep you for that. So just another example of like the environment that I grew up in. Like I say, I was so fearful every day he'd come home from work because is he going to be angry instantly? Do I have 5 minutes? Do I have an hour before he gets angry? So this fear that was instilled in me like all the time. And so there was also physical abuse up until I was like about high school. with a lot of slaps and spankings. I did have, outside of the family sexual abuse, I am currently unsure if anything sexually abusive happened to me within the family, as I don't remember the ages between 0 and 5, not in the way of just not remembering because I'm older now, in the way that I now know, because I've gone through this, for so long, therapy and trauma, and how we can disassociate time periods, is it feels blocked out, because that's how I've had situations come back to me that, or, when I've gone through therapy where I'm like, whoa, where's all this anger coming from? I blocked that because I wasn't allowed to be angry. I wasn't allowed to show any emotion growing up. Again, you'd get in trouble, you'd get yelled at, you'd get slapped, grounded. And this was just for being who you are. So at a very young age, I also taught myself not to be who I am, because that got me in trouble. I remember it was even really hard to speak my truth to people. Just, if I'd go someplace with my mom and dad and they'd be like, hey, like, I remember I'd always have to look at my dad like, can I talk, when they'd ask me a question? And then even at that point, I didn't know how to speak to people, because we weren't allowed to speak until spoken to. At least I wasn't allowed to. So these were some of the things that I first, would tell every single therapist when they'd ask, like, what are some of the things you dealt with growing up in your childhood? And so, again, I speak about these not to point fingers, not to send any negative energy or vibrations about it. This is just to give you, those of you who are listening to me, examples of what I dealt with, so you can understand and see, does this relate in a similar context? Because obviously my story is completely different from everybody else's, but there's going to be some of us who have similar context, right? And I have talked to other people about certain things like this, and they say, oh yeah, I've dealt with that. But okay, so some of the other things that I dealt with was addictions from the get-go. My family were drinkers. There was some drug use by like one or a couple family members, I guess, growing up, but it was drinking. Like, I saw drinking alcohol was like drinking water. In fact, it was way more drunken. Alcohol was drank more than water was, by far, for sure. And so that was the normal for me. That was like, I'm a drinker. Like, so I tried drinking for the first time in this. Okay, let me step back a second. So just to set the tone is, I had a very abusive, addictive, narcissistic, karmic type of emotionally immature father that showed no love. Like, I don't remember hearing the words "I love you" even until I was 14 years old for the very first time. And maybe I could say about a handful of times that I ever heard it, if a handful, that I ever heard it in my entire lifetime. And I'm in my 40s. So, and then my mom, like I say, unfortunately, she dealt with the abuse from my dad, even though I've realized, seeing her recently, that she's in hard denial about it right now. But I can tell stories when I was young about all the fighting and my dad bringing up a shotgun to her in the kitchen, up to her, like, horrific things that, like, because I remember thinking, wow, mom's gonna die, just horrific scenes that I was exposed to. And like, my brother and my sister were there too. But it's funny, because when I talked to my brother about that specific scenario, he's blocked a lot of that particular. There was this one moment, my mom and my dad, like, this was the moment she kicked him out. He had to stop drinking hard alcohol. This is where he stops drinking hard alcohol and just switches to beer, because beer is not alcohol, people. And so, spoken like a true alcoholic, and I grew up with them drinking and driving. Like, it's like, I was so scared to be in the car when I was young with them, because they would just be ripped off their asses and driving everywhere. They didn't care, with their kids in the car, and in snowstorms, and things like that. Just scary. And so there was just this constant fear, survival space that I had you know, created masks, tons of masks for myself. And that is how I learned how to live for the first part of my adult life. And then, like I say, my mom, because then my therapist would always ask me, like, well, what about your mom? Because I go, so we need to attend to the things about my dad, about him taking away self-love, or, having, self-love, self-worth issues. We need to attend to the fact that I feel like, by him, like, always yelling at me, don't speak until spoken to. This took away my ability to communicate, and I had to find my voice, which this is what this is part of, helping me overcome a little bit of that as well. As well as feeling like I have something important to say, because he would basically, like I say, it was very narcissistic bully style, about like if you said something that he didn't either understand because of his lack of knowledge about it, where he would get super insecure about his own intelligence level and then project his insecurities onto me. My mom was kind of doing the same thing, but in a lesser way. His anger and his issues that he dealt with overpowered, and this anger and this, nastiness, this, like, what I would call a monster growing up, overpowered anything my mom could have done. And so when they asked, like, was there anything that we need to attend to with your mom? I'm like, well, I never felt safe or protected with her because, there's so many different stories, basically. And I'm not going to get into these right now just for lack of time. But so there was just basically a space of that I had to learn at a young age, first of all, not to be myself, how to, try to get away from the house as much as possible because it was so negative, and I was always the brunt of anything that my mom or my dad wanted to project onto me, being the empathic, highly sensitive person. And that's typically what a narcissist will do, is they find their target. They find what they consider as an empath and a highly sensitive to be the weakest link. And then when you see this happening, you understand that this is happening within your own family unit, it is something just so epic to try to wrap your mind around. Anyways, okay, so you kind of have a base of what I dealt with growing up. And we came from a lower income, family. Just there's some of that. There's a lot of other things I think that I could say, but I'm just going to kind of move up to the moment now that I have, I think, what is the universe's first time of trying to awaken me. I was 20 years old. I was at the university going to school for my master's in this dual degree. Was actually, part of the degree was to become a teacher. Well, one of the first things I realized is by like my second year that I did not want to move forward with the teaching side of the degree, because I knew that I would fight with the Board of Education about my curriculum, because the whole reason I wanted to teach was to teach those of us lessons and information that were typically not shown. And this is my first kind of rationalization exposure to the system and how messed up it is and how controlled it is. My advisor at the time, I remember she got angry with me. She tried to ignore me then, since I had said, I'm going to go and focus on the second half of the major, not the teaching side. And she made it very evident that she got a stipend to put teachers, into circulation. And so anyways, that whole part of my career stopped instantly. That's when I said, well, I can train in business, because it was my dad who had me focus on going into the business world. Not because I wanted to again. No, that's not at all. This was my dad. He said, like, I had other ideas of occupations that I wanted to do when I was younger, and my dad literally would tell me that that's stupid, that's not a realistic goal, you can't do that. That kind of negative talk, kept getting instilled into me. Again, ripping away at my self-worth and my self-love. So once that happened, sorry, hold on, I'm just losing train of thought. Okay, so where I was 20, going to school for a major where I was going to teach. I choose not to teach. I choose to go into the business sector. And oddly enough, I wanted to be super focused in advertising. And I laugh to this day about that only because it's like the complete opposite. It's the most narcissistic career path and icky 3D controlled by the, powers that were control method to control human population, that I could have gone in as a soul coming down to try to awaken. So like I say, you guys, I have literally come from the bottoms of everything risen from all this. So, okay. The other thing, so that was the first thing in college. Okay, so what else? One of the other big things that happened is I had an abortion with who I would probably say at this point probably would have been a potential divine partner because he was amazing. We chose to have an abortion and together we made this. We took a long time we took a couple of weeks to make this decision. This was not anything done lightly. However, there was something inside me that, and I'm so sorry, I need to back up a second. Prior to me making this decision to have the abortion, I had found out that my sister had been molested by an uncle and that there was incest in the family. Because not only was he doing it to my sister, this uncle, he was doing it to his own son, my cousin. So this is where, I really am like, holy shit, I'm part of an after school special. And I was super ashamed and embarrassed to know that I was part of a family that this existed in. I was like, this is stuff that's on TV, and I kept that in for a long time before telling anybody outside of my mom and dad. To even tell them took me a couple of weeks to tell them. Or it took me about a month because it was a friend of mine from high school who we came across this information together about what had happened to my sister. And then it took me, the person that didn't even happen to, a month. So I remember always thinking like, wow, they always say that for people that have had to deal with that there's this fear that they're not going to be believed. And it's like, I experienced that fear of not being believed and it didn't even happen to me. I just had to express it, what had happened to somebody else. So that is real. But anyways, so what had happened is that it takes me about a month. I tell my mom and dad. They instantly broke down into tears. And, but for me, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This didn't just start at my uncle. This is a generational thing, which means that potentially grandpa and his grandpa and great grandpa and oh my God, and I don't know the terminology at the time, but all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm the only person who can see this to help the family. And I need to stop this from moving forward anymore within our bloodline. Like I say, the thought process I had at the time was not as understood as it is right now. However, this was my because out of the whole family, nobody was trying to help my sister except for me. Because she had been acting out. And everybody was being mean to her and, pushing her to the side and saying that she's doing a never cry wolf. And I was like, well, there's a reason she's doing it. Something's wrong. So when I came upon this, I was like, well, this makes sense why she's acting out. And then I said, well, then this makes sense why Dad's so angry. This makes sense why he's taking out his anger onto me. This makes sense why him and the whole family has a type of either rheumatoid or polyarthritis. That holding in this mental trauma and this emotional trauma is creating a physical disease within their bodies. So I could see, the pattern, let's just say, that none of the rest of the family could see. So I knew that I had a job ahead of me, which meant one of the things I told myself because I wanted kids so bad. I always knew, and I always was told I'd be a great mother. But I told myself that there is no fucking way that I will have a child and put a child on this planet until I can figure out how to heal in me what was not healed in my parents and their parents and so forth and so forth and so forth. because I knew at that point I had the empathy for my dad. This is where I went from being angry at how he had been treating me. And if I start crying when I say this, it's because I feel so like bad for him that he had to deal with that pain his whole life, and whatever pain my mom is dealing with as well. Like, it hurts my heart for them, you know? In the same way that it hurt my heart for my sister to find out that that had happened to her. But like I say, this is why I say knowledge is power, because once you know what somebody is dealing with, then you can get your logical mind to go, oh, okay, so this wasn't a personal thing. This is because they dealt with this, and this is what happens when you don't deal with issues, period. So that's why these journeys, these ascension, these awakenings are not for people that are weak-minded and weak. It takes courage and strength, because you have to face all those icky old demons and fears that you've been doing a really good job hiding deep down, right? Okay, so I knew at that point that I wasn't going to have a child to unconsciously, because obviously I wasn't ever going to intentionally try to hurt a child that I had. No. But unconsciously, when I looked back, because I know my parents didn't mean to, do the awful low vibrational things that they did, that it was a reaction from an action previous. And it's about having awareness around that so that you can break that chain from continuing to move forward. And somehow I knew this. I didn't know it, again, like I say, like I know it now, but I knew that I needed to be the one who stopped it from happening anymore. Obviously, I was never gonna, molest any, my kids. No. But like I say, there were these unconscious things when I look back on certain things that my mom and my dad, had done, that, like I say, there were long time that I held anger about it. But once I could see and have empathy for the fact that, oh, whoa, like they really went through some like intense trauma that they just have never processed. And this is what creates mental illness within the family. This is what creates the narcissistic traits that have been, that I'll be discussing moving forward as well. So, okay, hold on, I gotta pause. Oh, okay. So anyways, I knew then that I had a certain time frame, and so it was instant. I was like, okay, well, I want to start healing. Well, at the time, it was after I graduated, sorry, I don't want to go ahead yet, but so I have an abortion, and part of that decision to do that abortion was the fact that I was like, again, I am not ready. There's so much I still need to heal within myself so that I don't unconsciously, subconsciously do to my kids what my parents did to me, sort of thing. And again, no blame. This is not finger pointing. This is just the stating in the way that I can best state this in this format right now. So please bear with me with my articulation and my words, because at no point, again, am I blaming anybody. This is about pure facts about how somebody started low vibrational and has gone higher, okay? So the abortion, I thought I did all the mental things to prepare myself for that. And like I say, it's just unfortunate because the person that happened with, he would have been an amazing father, and I'm sure he is to this day, and husband. I would have been lucky to have ended up with him. Like I say, he was potentially, the universe was maybe trying to send me a divine partner at that time. But again, now knowing how, watching what has transpired in my mom's life, it's potential that I could have accidentally messed up my own child because of being stuck in this parasitic environment and not knowing how to get out of it. And if I would have had if I would have had a child in that, not coming out of it, I would have just continued the generational traumas, unconsciously, of course, because that's what's currently still happening within the family, unfortunately, for anybody that has decided to have kids and not heal. So, okay, so like I say, find out about the incest, have an abortion, which this will be something I bring up later, but I think I kept that in as something like, oh, I logically did that, so this isn't going to hurt me. But of course, who, like, as somebody who has a motherly, loving want for kids and loves kids, that of course is going to be really hard. But I tried to, again, hide my feelings because I taught myself how to do that really well because I wasn't allowed to show feelings. I would get in trouble for having feelings, especially anger, remember? So, um, so I lose my childhood best friend that I had known from, like kindergarten up through college. I also lose my college best friend during this time period. Like I say, okay, so obviously the incest thing we talked about, and so as I'm graduating from school, so I've lost the love of my life. I've basically lost everybody, and also it was about my second and third year. This is where I pick up drinking. Like I'm drinking, instead of just on the weekends as a college student would, that Thursdays got added in and then Wednesdays and then Mondays because of football, of course, and then all of a sudden the only day you're really missing is Tuesday. So, hey, there'll be a reason to drink for that. And like I say, coming from a family where drinking alcohol, like I, honest to God, during that time period and up until, well, like 7 years ago, I honest to God thought I'd be drinking to the day I die and could still like expand and grow and ascend. No, just I'm going to state that to everybody. No, you can't. Okay. That's something you can't do. Obviously, if you're drinking in moderation, very minimal, and in good vibrational spaces for people, it's not about just, no, it's just about, are you using it to numb and are you using it to run? And I'm just going to step back a second. When I was 14, I tried my first sip of alcohol. And somebody said this, and so I'm going to use this. It felt like glitter was going off in me. Like I felt confidence. I could speak my words, my truth. I could try to be me, the me that I knew how to be at the time. But the biggest thing is the confidence, that I could be. And so I only felt comfortable then drinking around other people. Because this was the other part is I could tell that I always felt super uncomfortable around people, but my mom kind of forced me to be around people and to try to, like, I had to speak to other people. And when you had to censor what you said because you didn't know if what you said was going to get you in trouble by your dad or your mom, it was hard to speak. So I hated speaking around other people, but alcohol helped that. So it was just another reason I loved it. And I was, till the day I stopped, I was a functional drinker. Literally, like I always had at least one job, if not up to 3 jobs at all times. And so it was never an issue. And that was the thing that made it tricky for me, is because like I say, growing up in a family where they were all functional drinkers as well, for the most part. Some of them there were a couple that had to, quit and, try to sober up. But for the majority, I mean, most of them should have, all of them should have. But for the majority, they made it look functional and able to live your life. So that was the mentality that I took on, because like I say, I really was guided. I was like, my dad was my authority, and I was so, what's the word? Like, I just had to do everything in what he said because I didn't want to face his wrath. That's how bad his wrath was for me. It was that frightening. And so, that's like I say, so drinking. So when I was 14, try it out here and there, and then loved it when I'd hang around friends because I felt like I could be more me, And then, like I say, so up until that 20-year point where I start picking up the pace and drinking, because I'm really feeling it and I'm like around a lot of people now. And this is what made me feel like I could actually hang around them. Ooh, coming up to 440, or so 44, 40, 44, 42, now 44, 44, everybody. Seeing the 4 4s so much. Okay, and that's great. We got protection. And by the way, there is protection in this compartment, and for any of you that resonate in high vibrations, as well as myself for this. Okay, so, okay. But on top of the drinking that had increased now for me during this time period around 2021, this is where my anger comes out for the first time. The anger that, again, that I had pushed way down because I wasn't allowed to show anger. I would get in trouble by my dad for having anger. He'd either yell at me, screaming in my face, and or slap me, hit me, however, if that came out. So my anger comes out. And like I say, this was the other thing that made me go, whoa, because who it came out on was the person that I had had the abortion with. And he had very good boundaries for himself. So he knew, when to say, nope, this is not okay. Because up until that point, there had been some issues that we were trying to kind of work through. And this was the final straw where he was like, nope, I deserve better. And he was right. Like, nobody deserves that. He had dealt with that growing up himself. And so he had every right to act, He is the example of what good boundaries looks like. And I was the example of bad boundaries. I had none. I wasn't allowed. It's the other thing. Boundaries were non-existent for me, okay? Physical and mental and, everything. All types of boundaries were not allowed in my life. I would get in trouble even to close my door to my bedroom, sort of thing. Okay, so like I say, my anger comes out for the first time against who I'm going to call potential like first divine partner possibility. And that broke me. It broke me because in a couple different ways, I knew it had messed up the relationship and that was my fault. But that I had allowed myself to do that. I was like, oh, gross. I've been trying everything not to be any of those low vibrations that my dad would put on me to anybody else. And that was another like wake up call to myself besides everything else that I had just mentioned, that I was like, oh my God, that's not good. I definitely need to, this is where I knew I needed outside help, like a therapist, to help me figure out how to unwind that, how to stop that from ever happening again. And this is where, again, just another thing that brings it into my realm to go, again, another reason why I need to be sure I heal these aspects of myself before I bring another human into this world, into my life, and make sure that they are, in a safe space that I never got to experience in my life. Because that was the whole point, is that I grew up in an unsafe, parasitic, toxic environment with emotionally immature family that I was like, I would never put my worst enemy in that scenario, let alone my own child. So, okay. So one of the other things, so here's basically the universe is trying to be like, you're the generational trauma / curse breaker. So like I say, my drinking kicked up a notch. I tried my first drugs during this time period as well. Oddly enough, before even cannabis, I tried mushrooms first, had an amazing experience. I think the universe wanted me to experience and try to connect even more, and it did, but it was very profound, and I had an amazing first trip, to the other side of the veil. But I still was so unawakened and just so naive and wet behind the ears as far as like not really being able to take advantage of it like I would now if I was to utilize plant medicine to try to connect on that deeper level shamanically with a shamanic guide and all that. So then after mushrooms, then I tried ecstasy, and that was amazing too. Obviously another drug to just make me feel like touchy-feely with people and more talkative. Then I tried Coke for the first time, and then came cannabis. And so I always just think that is funny because typically people start with cannabis and then build up. And anyways, I feel like the universe brought me the mushrooms to try to show me plant medicine again. There was such the universe, you'll hear, and I look back on this journey, and the universe was trying so hard to shake me awake and like see if we shake my shoulders and be like, wake up. It's time to wake up. And that's the thing, is the longer we wait, the harder it is to try to reprogram ourselves, right? That's just what makes it harder. I mean, I wish I could have woken up at 20. Hell yeah. Like, I give so much credit to all the young ones that are able to do that at a young age. Congratulations. Good for you. It's amazing. Because it just gets harder, there's more you have to unload. Okay. So let's see here. So again, I mentioned the fact that the other thing that I wanted to be sure I didn't get was this arthritis, which, like I say, I saw the connection of the sexual abuse within the family, being that unprocessed trauma, creating this physical dis-ease of rheumatoid and polyarthritis. And I wanted to ensure as well through my healing that was another, what's the word? Bonus, for me to heal, is because I could see that connection, that if I don't heal these things that are unconscious within them, and that could be unconscious within me, things I don't even know yet, that I potentially could get arthritis too, because the whole family on my dad's side had it, and bad, So, let's see here. Okay, that's pretty much up until 20, everybody. And like I say, the reason that I wanted to give you that first just understanding of where I came from was to just set the scene, set the stage of what is going to come now, okay? Because now we're going to move into, so right after I graduated school, right before I graduated college, I get my first DUI. And I remember them saying in court that time that they'd said something like, you'll be one of those that gets like the first one leads to 4 or 5. And I was like, that seems so stupid. Why would somebody allow that to happen? Just you wait. Okay, after college, I just know I don't want to go home. Obviously, this makes sense now. Why not? And I had a friend from college say, oh, well, I'll move with you. We move out to a state where I receive a second DUI out there. Almost instantly once I get out there. And again, like I say, I'm a functional drinker with occasional drug use at the time. And in the beginning stages, the drug use was just more, it was numbing, definitely, but it was more fun too. Like, I was experimenting, I guess, and I was having fun with it during those beginning stages, but also unconsciously using it to hide what's happening inside of me, But like I say, drinking was my drug of choice for sure. This was just like, there was a lot of like ecstasy or mushrooms or acid type of things done. Those kinds of drugs. I would say a lot of ecstasy probably was used then, because we went to a lot of raves. But then, so I kind of start by the end of my time period there, drinking more again. See, because I think what would happen is I'd get into these places where I'm like, I'm not happy. And I hadn't really started my awakening journey yet. I was just trying to live and, get my career going from college and getting a job set, because it was always like, you got to get your life figured out and then you can do these other things. And so I had just graduated with this business degree / teaching degree. And so was like, no. Okay, so then I lose another best friend out there though. Okay, and so you can kind of see the pattern that's, happening here. And again, for me, I can look back on it easily now and go, oh, it was easily because of the drinking and because of how much I was drinking all the time. Like, it was 5 o'clock somewhere. That's the philosophy I grew up with. Like, literally, my family would always have a happy hour drink ready to go by 5 o'clock, if not earlier, especially on the weekends. Noon was a pretty popular time to get started. So, again, this was a lifestyle that to me, I was just like, I felt like everybody drank this much. I know that seems so stupid and naive, but it was just what I thought, like, granted, I knew some people didn't drink that much, but I just thought they were kind of prude, like, it's like, oh, they just don't know how to have fun. And this is allowing me to loosen up a little bit. Okay, so now we're gonna go to like about 5 years later, after 20. So about 25 years old, I moved back to my home state with my parents at the time because that DUI, the second one I got out there, really kind of wrecked me financially. And then I started at this one job that it just wasn't moving very well because it ended up being like this really weird pyramid marketing job that, anyways, I ran out of money trying to pay for this DUI because at no point did I ever have any financial support from anybody else to help me through any of this. I do remember that second DUI because I got arrested on a Friday, and this would have been my first night or first time being arrested on a DUI, having to spend more than like just one night there, and or getting picked up that same day. And I had to spend the weekend because that's what happens if you get arrested on a Friday. You have to stay until Monday for court. And I remember calling home to my parents, and I remember it was only like $200 that they would have just needed to pay to get me out so I didn't have to spend the weekend in jail. And I remember clear as day, my dad was like, nope, you need to suck it up. We're not gonna, and I've heard so many people be like, wow, your parents kept you in, let you stay in. Like, and again, I say these things because at the time they got me to believe like, well, that's a proper way to try to teach somebody. And I'm like, but that's the thing is I'm not drinking. Like, I wasn't drinking and driving in a stupid way. I was doing it as like, I felt, well, that's a whole nother thing. But anyways, because at no point, just FYI, did I ever drive drunk. I drove buzzed. So that was acceptable, people. Okay. I'm joking when I say this. Please know that. But that was my philosophy back then. So while I'm at home, I am also now trying to get what will be my first and only corporate job that I had for 7 years, but I was in the process of trying to get hired at this company. So in the interim, I was serving at a restaurant and I was doing a lot of doubles just to, get money and make money. And so during this time period, my dad at the age of 25 physically attacks me over a false narrative that him and my mom had created back then. And had I been really paying attention to what was happening at that moment with what they did, it was literally projecting future events. Because what happened was I was at this restaurant, I was doing a double, and they had suspicions, I guess, that I wasn't going to work. I don't know why, because I've never been that person. And this was, again, the false narrative that my mom and dad had created about me. They started to believe this stuff about me. I was a very responsible person. And I was on my lunch break, and what happened was my mom and dad called the restaurant. I wasn't there. They spoke to some like kitchen worker who barely could speak English and didn't know me. And so it was like, no, she's not here. So they freak out. Their suspicions are correct that I'm not working. So they come down to the restaurant. As I'm coming back from my break with my friends, we'd always go to the restaurant next door to get lunch and then come back for our second shift. And I'm all fully uniformed, and like there's my mom and dad, and they're screaming like, where are you? What are you doing? And so embarrassing. Like, are you freaking kidding me? So that night when I come home, I'm like, what the hell? And my dad, as I'm like, because I was like, that's inappropriate. And I couldn't have that type of adult type of mature conversation with emotionally immature parents because they can't be wrong, even when they're wrong. So when I'm like, that was, so crossing so many boundaries, my dad basically got so freaking angry with me that I was at the sink, and he takes my head and he slams it down into the sink, and he's holding it down, and I can barely breathe because he's holding my neck so hard that I was 25, and that's when I have my first time now where I have to cut out my dad. from my life, because that was the final straw for me at that point. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I didn't even create, like, you literally created an issue that does not exist. And for somebody who is very responsible and is got, for, I had my life, I mean, besides getting the DUIs and stuff, that's the only difference between myself and my mom and dad is they just never got busted. That literally is the only difference, because they drank just as much, if not more, than I was drinking. So there really was no issue. And so, this is where I go to live with my friend who was, I didn't know at the time, but an alcoholic herself. And so again, I go a year without speaking for him because of his abusive ways towards me. He never apologizes, even to the day he died. Never apologized for acting that way. Because that's another, the reason I speak that is because narcissists don't apologize, okay? Just keep that in mind. So yeah, I move in with my friend. She's also dealing with her own family issues and their lack of love and emotional support, which, turns her into hard alcoholic. She was hiding vodka bottles and things like that around her house. And I realized that as I'm living with her. Okay. So that brings me up to starting my corporate job that I worked at for, like I say, 7 years. And so it's about 25, 26 for me. And again, so I am doing this job where I'm actually traveling all over the world. Got to spend time a couple of months in like Sydney, Australia and things like that. It was amazing. I was training offices and things like that into with the applications and things like that I was creating and working. I managed teams in this company. And it was fun until it wasn't. I remember 3 years out of the 7 years though, and I stand up in my cubicle and I'm like, my soul is getting taken from me. I cannot be doing this anymore. This is not fulfilling. And it takes me 4 years to gain the courage to quit, basically, from that moment. But that's just, again, I think back and again, that was my soul, my higher self being like, knock, knock, knock. You're not on the right path still, and we're here trying to gently let you know. So during this time period, like I say, I'm at this corporation, and I'm in my home state. Now at this point, I get a third DUI, but it actually gets taken away because I was only just sitting in my vehicle because I had stepped outside as I was talking to a boyfriend at the time, went in to sit in my car because my roommates were fighting, a couple that the guy, he was my roommate and his girlfriend and him, they were fighting and I was trying to talk to my boyfriend and I just wanted some space. So I just go sit in my car, but I had been drinking throughout the day. And then a cop, my bad luck, a cop pulls up from behind, and because it started to go into nighttime and it was starting to get cold, so I put my keys in the ignition just to turn some heat on, and cop decides to check me out because apparently there had been robberies in the area, and even though I had a ponytail and it was a male suspect, they suspected that I could have been this person. So I get arrested for a third, but like I say, it gets dropped off my record because obviously I wasn't driving, I was just sitting there. So that happens. And I go, at this time as well, I am one of those daters that, I date a guy for a year and a half, 2 years, and then it crumbles, but then I'm right into the next relationship because my codependency was just boiling. It was epic. It was on. I was so codependent, and so I end up dating this particular person, and we end up moving in together. And so it's the first person that I live with. Well, he was kind of, he got to a place where he lost his job and I was supporting him. And I had just been supporting like the previous boyfriend as well. So it was, I was feeling that I wanted somebody to take care of me too. I was giving all this emotional support and assistance to my partners, but not receiving it back, in balance and in harmony. So I get to a point where I decide, because now this point I'm really debating, trying to leave the company. I want to move to a different state. I want to leave this particular person that I'm with because I'm realizing he's not going to be the one I'm going to marry or, be with for the rest of my life. And because I gave him options, I let him know, and he just continued to do the same thing. So, I remember even telling my mom at the time, like, Mom, he's not treating me the way that you would want your daughter to be treated by a partner. And she actually got mad and tried to get me to stay with him. And again, that's a narcissistic quality that is just beyond anything. But anyways, so again, me pointing these things out, just these are setting, giving you little breadcrumbs for when I get to certain places about discussing a little bit more about the styles of people that I'm growing up with. But I think you're kind of grasping it. So, okay. So I move to a different state. I quit the current position at the company that I'm at, but then they offer me in the state that I'm moving to a promoted position where I'd be working from home, managing a team of people. And I liked this because I was like, you know what? This is where I was really, really going to try to take it seriously to try to get my holistic healing, energetic healing career path on its way. And when I was trying to start to do this, once I got out there, I figured that this type of a job would allow me a little bit of time maybe to figure out, because I wanted to go back to school for my nutrition and dietitian and psychology masters. I wanted to start kind of heading in that direction, as well as starting to learn the energetic modalities like Reiki and breath work and sound therapy and all these modalities that I end up learning later. But this was the intentions at this point of saying, okay, even though I wanted to quit this job and I don't want to, take another job within it, this will maybe help me. And so I leave my home state, I break it off with the boyfriend that I'm with, and I move all by myself with my 2 cats. And they were like 7 or 8 at the time, maybe 5. Oh, they were like 5 at the time, possibly. And because I had 3 cats at the time. So the three of them and myself move out there. I have a huge vehicle with so much stuff, and my tow dolly with my vehicle, and move out to the state all by myself. Literally drive out there by myself. And start my new job within the company, the corporate company, but am also actively trying to find Eastern Chinese medicine schools. And I found one out there, but knew that I didn't have enough money to just pay for it. So I was going to try to work with, scholarships and grants and, financial aid and things like that. But then realized that this particular school didn't have that as an option at that time to offer scholarships. So now it was like, well, shoot, what am I going to do? I had not yet learned, became savvy enough to utilize YouTube as a learning tool yet at this point for myself. And so now I meet the guy out there, this partner at the time, who I basically spent my whole 30s of my life on and off dating. He was a manic bipolar with diabetes type 1. So got a lot of exposure in learning about the stigmas of bipolar, because he was hard manic when I met him and I didn't understand that. But I learned very quickly. And I'm one of those that when I don't understand something, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to dive deep into understanding what's happening, because he was manic. And if anybody's ever experienced a manic bipolar in a state where they're not trying to help themselves and manage their illness, then it's very chaotic and they take people down around them. And it took me a long time to, first of all, understand that it wasn't about me that he was doing that these were unresolved issues in himself. And then get to a space now where he breaks me so hard that I end up in my first depression off of like, because we broke up and got back together like 3 times, like I say, in a matter of 10 years. I really truly thought that he was supposed to be the one for me. And during this period now, my mom and my dad end up saying that they don't like him, and we end up in another time period where I had to out them from my life, because my mom was trying to judge me on the fact that I was dating this person who ultimately just ended up not being, the right person for me. Correct. So she was right, but it was like, you still got to let me make my own decisions, and you can't be angry with me or hold, grudges over me because of my decisions. Like, it's my decision. You're supposed to just be the parent and be there for me. But again, narcissistic upbringing does not allow for that type of grace, right? So, and in mentally ill situations too. So the, okay, hold on, I gotta pause. Okay. So, where I was at was, so I had met this previous partner who was, when I met him, now I know this, manic, bipolar, also having like diabetic, ketoacidosis episodes and things like that. But we met June 14th of 2007. And the goal as I was right before I met him, because I moved in April of 2007. And so it was only a couple of months that I had been in this new state before I meet him. And then, he ends up, oh shoot, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Okay. So yeah, my intentions were to cut back on my drinking, because again, my goal is that I'm trying to go into holistic health and, self-empowerment and ascension and everything, but having not the knowledge that I have now back then. But so I wanted to stop the drinking, because I was like, at the time I was 29, and I was like, I wanted to try to stop drinking by my 30s, and that was kind of the goal. But I was exposed to a lot of financial loss during this time because of that person I dated, because he kept coming back to me when he'd end up in jail, or just for money, and he broke me financially, and because I was the person that would say yes. I had not had any boundaries at that time. So I would just see it as because he knew how to work me. I need money for food, or, like, there was always a reason. And he would always, speak to the heart of me, where it's like, oh, I don't want to see him like on the streets, or, so I was letting him into my place. And, he was also, when he would get manic, very aggressive and abusive at times. And I know he doesn't remember a lot of this. And again, like, I only say this because this all took a toll on me. And like I say, so I hit this first depression, and I go home to my home state, and I talked to my mom about the fact that, I had been through a depression, because, like, I know I have a nice smile, and I remember at the time I couldn't have a genuine smile. And I remember, like, I was like, the one thing that I can do really well and that makes people happy is my smile, and I can't even do that. And so when I went home, I tried to recruit, and my mom for support. Like, the only support I was wanting was just emotional support. Like, hey, if I'm having a minute and I'm trying to understand what depression is at this time, I just know that I felt sad and I had no happiness. And I wanted some help through that. So when I had said, Mom, hey, can I, if this happens, can I get you to help support me? And her supporting me was gossiping about the neighbors, which I was like, and that's angering for somebody who's like, it's like, really? You're just going to negate everything I said. You're not going to give me any supportive or encouraging words, and you're going to start like gossiping about the neighbors? It's like, oh, hell no. So at the time, like I say, so I was exposed to financial loss because of him, and there was a lot of police contact. So much because of how aggressive he would get. Excuse me. And so, oh, hold on 1 second. I forgot. I just need to do something. Okay. So, sorry, I had to plug in my charger. My laptop was going to die. So, okay, so I find out that I'm not going to be able to get any support from my mom, and this literally breaks my heart. It just wrecks me because it's bringing back so much trauma from growing up of not having any support in any type of way with anything in my life, always having to be the adult to figure out everything myself. And that's what happens as a child of emotionally immature adults coming from this very narcissistic, parasitic environment. So, and again, please just note that by me specifying terms, it's for people to know that what that means is parasitic, narcissistic, emotionally immature. These are all terms that help you just see a vibration level. Like anger, fear, shame, guilt is all low vibration. So are these terms. These are people then that are at that level. Okay? So, so then in like I get a fourth DUI. Well, what I call my fourth, but like I say, was technically my third out in the state. And I have to start doing court ordered stuff. So during this time period, there was an option for me to do one-on-one therapy on my own regard, like just in my own, without having the court say that you have to do this. This was me saying, okay, here I can have an opportunity to, start this healing again that I want to start doing. Let's do that. So this is the first moment where I can now have a therapist to maybe try to help me work through some of my childhood things. So I take this on. Well, through this, we did some work. She helps me identify the fact that the guy that I was dating was bipolar. And then we get to a place where, because at this point, I had not been speaking to my family for 3 years. Now, keep in mind, this was just me not reaching out to them, but they still had my number where they could call me. And I kind of forget at the time, like if I would take the calls or not, but I wouldn't reach out to them, but they would reach out to me sometimes. And so, but I forget, like, cause I mean, this was the first 3 years of me not speaking to them because I didn't know what to do. I'm like, well, you're not helping me being around, and it feels like you're actually hindering my progress forward. So fine, you know what? Like, I don't know what to do. I gotta, out you. You can't be part of this. Then if you don't want to help me move forward and you only want to hold me back, then I unfortunately have to say bye-bye. And that's a hard decision to make. And I say this because I've heard a lot of the kids these days are using this as a tool to get back at their parents for, not giving them something. And this is not what I'm talking about, people. This is not about punishment to somebody. This is about having to do what's right for you, to keep you in safe spaces, to keep you away from the parasitic environment that is only trying to bring you down. And like I say, I didn't understand any of that at the time. I had no idea what I was doing. It's a very hard thing. But at that time, like I say, they at least still had, there was contact that could be had. So through this therapist that I'm working with on this one-on-one, she says to me, knowing I hadn't been speaking to my mom and dad for 3 years, she said, well, would you be ready to start speaking with them? What if we asked them to come out to the state for 5 sessions to do therapy with you? So I said, yeah, I think I'm ready. Let's do that. So I reach out to my dad. He gets back to me instantly, and they come out. Like, it was so awesome because I was like, wow, they actually care. And this was the first moment in my life, into my early 30s where I'm like, whoa, my parents do actually care, because I had no idea up to this point because of, their actions up till this point. So, we get to the 5th session. Things were going great. I thought things were going fabulous. The last session, the therapist says, you all get to ask each other a question. And I wanted to ask my dad. Like, I was dying to ask my dad because I had only had a chance to speak to my mom about the incest within my dad's side of the family. And she didn't know because she had never obviously taken the time to talk to him about this. She just knew that something weird did exist, and she just knew something was off and weird, but couldn't help understand that any more than that. So I go, yeah, I know what my question is. Dad, what happened in the family? Did something happen to you? And or did you just witness something? Or not just, but did you witness something? And he started to like give me an answer. And as he started to open his mouth and respond, my therapist was like, oh, don't do this, because this was our last session. She was like, you don't want to open this can of worms, because if we have him start talking about this, this is going to unravel something and open Pandora's box, where then it's open. And we all know what happens when you open up some trauma and you don't finish processing it. You mirror that back at you. And this was going to be a big one that, yeah, of course, now knowing what I know, yeah, like she goes, no, we need to get him home, let's get him set up with a therapist to begin to start to have somebody dedicated to him, so that once he does answer that question, he's got somebody that can continue helping him to process that. Fair enough, and like I say, but it was the thing that I was like, oh my God, he was so close. Like, I wanted to know what had happened, wouldn't you, like I say, for me, it helped me have empathy for my dad. I was like, well, no wonder he's so angry and angry and angry. He's got all this fear because he lived in way more of a fear and based environment than he could have ever created for me, and parasitic, So, okay. So finally, that happened. Then in 2010, I finally quit the corporate company that I was working for 7 years to the day, and to pursue my dreams of becoming a healer, coach, consultant, advisor, right? So first thing I do is I start massage therapy school out there in this state. And unfortunately, due to some life circumstances, I'm not able to complete it. Now, from this moment on, because people talk about this, that once you start to awaken, and especially as a chosen 144,000 light worker that is trying to wake up and shine the light for others, it's one of those scenarios where if you don't have your spiritual side in check and your protections and all this, you're going to have some pushback on the attempts of you trying to awaken. I did not know this at the time, but I remember feeling this because like it was very weird at the time. Like after I left my job, then I start schooling, and then all of a sudden my vehicle at the time breaks down, and then I lose a job that I had where now I can barely pay to get the car fixed, let alone get to my classes. So I end up having to quit the schooling at the time. And so basically what I'm trying to get at is because there was just more stuff that kind of kept getting in the way. Again, I am definitely still drinking at the time. I have not quit. Because whenever moments would get tough, one of my coping mechanisms was to drink when things got hard. So, I'd always be like, well, after this, after I get through this, then I can quit, It was my mentality at the time. And so, sorry, hold on. Okay, so anyways, we're going to just start off here now for the next, so I've got you caught up to this point where now we're at 2014, and I find out that my one of my really good friends from my hometown had taken her life. And so here's like another thing getting taken away. She potentially committed suicide. That's the story that's been said, at least. And again, she came too from a family where she was not feeling loved. Her situation is her mom tried to buy her love with things and thinking that was showing her daughter love. And her daughter was like, no, where's my actual love? I need so much more. And it was just too much for her. It was just so painful for her. So, and then she ended up going through a really rough moment. However, I go home for her funeral. And it's during this time period that I tried to make amends with my parents as well. I think this is, I might be a little bit, anyways, I'm the bigger one that, really makes the statement to really move that forward, as I always was the adult within my own family, to be the adult over my own parents. So we start communicating again. But again, this is where I say, hey, I really need that support from you guys, in a way where I need emotional support when I am feeling, not like that. I need emotional support. I need a hug sometimes, like I need a hug. I need some physical attention to know that everything's going to be okay. And it wasn't coming. And so this will again now spark another time period where I have to cut them off again. So, well, kind of like on and off. Like, I just know that I can't be as communicative with them as I would like to be, because this angers me. It's like, wow, like, they can't even help me with something like this, where it's like, all I need, I'm not asking for money, I'm asking for emotional support. And that was the other thing, is I was always getting through all my stuff all by myself, all the DUIs financially by myself, everything. So, now comes 2012 in the state that I'm at, and I meet this particular person that ends up being my first like narcissistic psychopath, that I now the universe is like, okay, we've been trying to wake you up. We're going to really start to mirror some things back at you right now, so that we can see if this will help wake you up. And so they send him in. And I meet this person while I'm working at this particular job, and we become like, friends with benefits sort of thing. And by the end of it, I find out that he's on heroin, and that was just definitely one drug that I'm allergic to. And so, but also just didn't want to bother with people that were trying to go into that heavy of a drug at that time, because it was hot mess. And I had seen that from other people throughout my earlier partying days, whenever we would run into people that were opiate addicted individuals. And nothing against them. We're all, it is all the same. I'm just saying, for me at the time, I just knew it was like, I just dealt with this manic situation, and I was like, no, it's chaos no more. And so I try to tell this guy that, because of you being on heroin, I don't want to see you anymore. And there was an incident where he ends up stabbing me in my leg with a rusty spatula. And I end up having to call the cops because of where he stabbed me, because it could have potentially I could have died from where he stabbed me, to be honest. And so what had happened from that point is, that person had already been dealing with 3 domestic violence cases at the time, but had made me think that it was the females, that they were all just, trying to get back at him. And again, I was so naive at the time. I believe this and think that he's right about that. But now, because I have to call the cops, and we had been, on and off dating supposedly. So they call this domestic. So this was his 4th domestic now that tips him into prison. And this is where the revenge scam and scheming starts from this particular individual. And that trickles now into the rest of what you're going to hear now. So just know that existed. But again, this is just, the universe is just sending me so many things to try to wake me up. And I am just like, I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? It's the drinking. It's the drinking. And if I can take the drinking out, then these things won't be happening. But it's the universe saying, you know what, you need to stop drinking, is what I'm thinking. So now I end up actually getting gang stalked out of that particular town, because the person that ended up having to go to prison because of his attack on me and his domestic violence on the 3 previous women he was facing charges on at the time. He tells his home, like all the people that I knew too, they all turn against me, and my life is being threatened at this point, and I'm being told to leave, otherwise they're going to kill me, and this and that, just pure fear. So I have to quit my job. And now at this time, I leave this state and move to a different state to go try to be with the manic bipolar person one last time, because I still had some like unresolved love that I thought like, okay, I really still feel like we're supposed to be together. Let's see, because he had been making it sound like he was finally kind of starting to learn how to manage it, and I was taking his word for it. And to be honest, like, I didn't want to go back home. I knew that wasn't going to be an option, but this, I thought, let's see if this will work. So I moved to this state to give one last attempt on this relationship. Well, within the first 6 months, I find out that it's not. He ends up, using drugs to trip him into mania, and and that was my final straw. And I had told him, I go, if you end up not wanting to manage this for yourself, then I'm going to end up just falling out of being in love with you. I've given all my energy to you, everything, and I have nothing left to give if you can't make this work equally with me moving forward. So while I'm in this state, instead of just, because at this point I'm like, now where do I go? Like, what do I do? And I wanted to not run anymore anyways, because I kept hearing people say, well, you shouldn't just run because you're running away from your problems. So I'm like, well, let me just try to see if I can make living in this state work out, even though I did not really want to live in the state. But let's try. So I sign up for massage therapy school once again and start on that process. But now I'm pretty messed up, not just from what had happened from this previous person, but from the guy so there was just these really scary moments, and they're, I think, triggering my fear from childhood. So a lot of fears coming out of me. I'm dealing with social anxiety for the first time. I end up doing EMDR therapy because the guy that attacked me in that state that ended up in prison, I ended up with a restitution where I got some therapy, and I was able to experience EMDR for the very first time. And it was very effective. This woman got me to get past the incident that happened with that guy that put me in this fear and survival place. However, because it had opened up Pandora's box to my childhood fears and survival, I now had this unrelentless anxiety, and I started having panic attacks for the first time, and I'm not really understanding what's happening. And then I'm also dealing with this, partner who is, telling me he's going to manage, and he's not, but he had at this time had his family against me at this time because of the false narratives that he was saying about me. And, because again, he didn't want them to look at him in a wrong light. So he would project the issues onto me. And so what had happened was, at that point, is that I forgot. Hold on. So I'm serving at this point. Break off with this guy. I'm, doing my own thing. I'm, in my own place, trying to make it work out on my own in this state, going back to school for massage therapy school, and also trying to get my NASM physical trainer schooling, because I had actually grown up as a soccer player, played for 18 years, and was was pretty good, where, I knew how to work out, no problem. That was something that came very naturally and easy to me. So I thought, well, let's, add that into my repertoire of, tools that I can help other people with and help people learn, is how to, work out and make your body healthy. And so I really was trying to put my focus now on holistic healing once again. And drinking was on and off. It depended on if there was something that would trigger something in me to make me feel like, I could be stronger at not drinking during certain times, and certain times I was weak, like so much weaker at being able to control that. So again, drinking is my drug of choice at this point. But again, if drugs were around, was, utilizing them for numbing agents. And typically they would only come out more or during moments where, like I say, I was trying to numb or hide emotions and trying to keep them down, because that's how I knew how to do it. And so, okay, now what happens is, in 2016, I am in this state, and I'm trying to do, like I say, I'm trying to heal, and I'm trying to get myself into this place of setting myself up to start into my healing life. and Awakening Life. And in 2016, I find out that my grandpa had passed 2 weeks after he had passed. My mom and dad, as emotionally immature as they are, chose to not contact me by saying that they didn't have my phone number. But my sister ends up calling me 2 weeks. This is the person who calls me 2 weeks into this moment and says, Grandpa died. And we've had the funeral. And he's gone. And this was my final straw. This is where I start the cutoff from my family, that they had no idea where I was. They probably didn't even know if I was still alive over time. Because I was so hurt, so heartbroken, because I was really close with this grandpa. And to find out that they, because of their own emotionally immature ways, to try to hurt me by not telling me that he died. To try to hurt their own daughter, their oldest daughter. That was a hard one for me to wrap my mind around. That was it. I couldn't handle it anymore. I fucking got so pissed, and I'm like, fuck this shit. At the time, the person I had the on and off relationship with, that manic bipolar person, or bipolar, sorry, I'm just, and so not to have to say names, I'm just referencing what I've already referenced. So we were living together at the time too. He was wanting to try to get back together, and I didn't have it in me anymore. So, but he had been trying to get back to, and it was hard, and we were living together. And so on top of finding this out about my family, totally betraying me by not giving me the option to try to grieve my grandfather's death, know about it even. And then my sister calls me with this information, and she feels that it's okay and says, oh, mom and dad said that they didn't have your number, but you do, that kind of a thing. And this is the style of parasitic environment I grew up in. So the one thing I was happy about is I said, because I knew it was going to be World War III in the family when these grandparents began to pass, because of the inheritance that was going to be had by them, because they had all been fighting over land and money my whole life. And that's what narcissistic, characteristic style, emotionally immature karmics do. Okay. So I was happy that I was not part of that, because to me, that was always my fear, was when grandma and grandpa pass, holy shit, they're all going to be fighting about the land and the money, and I don't want to be part of it. So that's why I was like, you know what? Screw you guys. And like, you guys care so much more about money than you do human life. I don't want anything to do with this, and I want nothing to do with this disgusting family, is how I felt at the time. I'm just letting you know my emotions at the time. So at that time, it was weird. I get a call in February 17th of 2017. I get a call from an old friend in the state I had moved from, where I met the bipolar guy that I had dated. And I moved back to that state because this friend is saying, hey, randomly, I'm going to be coming out to your state, which was weird, because why would he be having to come to this particular state? I didn't think about that back then. But he's like, yeah, so I'd like to stop by and say hi. And at the time, I had just found out that my parents had not told me about my grandpa's death. So I said, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to come back with you to that state. And can I hop a ride with you, me and my cats? He said, absolutely. And I ended up finding out that it was actually a setup from the guy that ended up in prison. This was all a revenge thing to try to get me back into this place. Anyways, just setting that tone right there, because so what had happened, because now things are going to really speed up, people. There's a lot that happened. Okay. So I leave this state that I was at with the bipolar person I was living with. And I break his heart because he was wanting to get back together with me. And I just didn't have any thing left to give. I mean, he had taken my whole 30s from me. And not like taking it from me, like I learned a bunch. So, but I'm just making words. So okay, so then what had happened is I start this journey, this 2-day driving journey back to the state, and what happens is I find out on that first night that, ooh, something is not right, and I might have made a really bad decision, but I had already committed and I didn't know what to do because I kind of felt like, I can't go back to where I was. It was in a situation where I'd be living with him, and I felt like that was only encouraging him to try to make him think he had hope that we were going to get back together. And I was like, that's not fair of me to do that. So I'm like, okay. But I find out that this particular person, who was just a good guy when I knew him, we even almost dated at one point, but we were just friends in the previous. And when I saw him again, he was really skinny. He looked like he was kind of like on some like pretty hard drugs or something. And so that night, like, he does something that freaks me out, and we're coming into the state that next day, and I'm like, oh God, let's stop at a liquor store. I need to numb this out right now. So like, we go to a liquor store, anyways, from that moment, I find out, because we get back into the state that night, and then I find out that I had a warrant out for my arrest for 5 years from when I had left. And that the person, let's go back all the way to the person that ended up in prison, that there was that group of people that he knew, his family and his friends that I befriended, but that all turned against me. They had set me up on a felony fraud. And I ended up having to, I got arrested for it because there was a warrant out for my arrest. I had no idea the first 3 days I was in jail what I was in jail for, until finally they told me they thought I had been running. They thought I was acting stupid, because that's what criminals do, I guess, and I, even though I had DUIs in the past, I'm far from a criminal, just making stupid decisions. And so that's what happened is that I get arrested, and I find out I'm facing a felony fraud charge. It's something I didn't do. I'm being set up. And this is the start of what happens when when revenge scams and scammers and con men and psychopaths and like people on the antisocial spectrum, narcissistic style type people, what happens? This is a scenario that can occur. Now, this is where the story really gets good. So I think what I'm going to try to do here is, because I still got quite a bit that I need to get through, and I think if I try to cut this up into 2 parts, this might be a little bit easier to ingest for everybody. So I'm going to stop there for now, and this is part 1. Part 2 is to come. Again, if you've stayed up until this point, thank you for listening. I know hopefully I'll get better articulating and becoming a better storyteller through this process. And yeah, like I say, just thank you so much for listening. Again, the purpose of my timeline and my story to get out there is because my story is meant to show you that you can face a lot of obstacles, and that you may have chosen a soul contract coming into this lifetime that was meant for you to experience what life is like without getting the love, the unconditional love that we should all have. But at the same time, there's life paths that soul contracts are taking to really expand their awareness, and we're part of that. If you're listening to this still, we are part of that. And so again, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with part 2. Thank you.